Lord's hand was with them, and a great number of people believed and turned to the Lord. And we were talking about people's response to the gospel message that Peter had preached to the house of Cornelius in Caesarea. Okay, verse 22. News of this reached the church in Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas to Antioch. So the church's response in Jerusalem to the church growth in Antioch was not one of jealousy or competition. This was one of love and wanting to support what they were doing up there. And when we look at who Barnabas was he sent there to see what's happening in Antioch, to assess as far as what are they teaching. Because when you have this new faith and word starts to grow about what Jesus did, the potential for heresy would be just absolutely phenomenal. Because well, Jesus did this, well, Jesus did this, well, Jesus said this, well, Jesus said that. Well, how do you know? And so in order to achieve this type of what we would call, lack of a better term, orthodoxy, or what we believe today, these traditional beliefs that we believe today about what Jesus taught, it had to be closely scrutinized, it had to be closely monitored, it had to be closely supervised to ensure that the correct message was out there. If we look at that first century after Jesus died, the number of books that were written about Jesus. Have you ever heard of the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Mary, the Shepherd of Hermes, the Didache, the Apocalypse of Peter? We've heard of the Gospel of Thomas, have we not? Heard of the Gospel? All of these books are written after the Gospels are written, after all of the books of the New Testament are written. All these books are, well, actually the Didache was written earlier, but it doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to make is that you had all of these people saying that they were disciples and using one of the disciples' names. For example, the Epistle of Barnabas. Have you ever heard of this? This was a widely popular book in the late 2nd century, from like 105 to 130. It was very popular. The problem is, here's the problem. Many of these books contained great teachings. They were very similar to the Gospels, but not quite. It's like buying a pair of Air Jordans that are not knockoffs that you get from China or something. Oh wait, they make Air Jordans in China. You buy them, they're made in, I don't know, wherever they're made. You know what I'm saying. This is where you get these, and this is how they knew that these books were not part, why they were not included in the canon. So you have here, even here, early, where you have Barnabas, and this is why we have the Epistle of Barnabas, is because he was a very prominent player in the early church. And when they went around and they were growing churches and Christianity was spreading, people like Barnabas had to go to those churches to ensure that they were teaching orthodox beliefs, and they would not allow a lot of these Gnostic or these heretical beliefs to creep into the Christian faith. It was very difficult. If you look at a lot of those, the writings of the early church fathers, it was a constant battle to keep these heresies out of the church. Why? Because people wanted to use, and just like men of all time have tried to use religion in order to empower themselves and to control other people. And this is why they sent Barnabas, is because he knew what the orthodox teachings of Christ were, and he also was a very prominent leader in the church in Jerusalem. Okay. I should have just clicked and then you would have seen that. Sorry. Okay. So when we look at, so here's what one of the things that I was saying. When you look at the early church fathers, Irenaeus was, if you follow this, there's only four. You have Jesus, then you have his disciple John, and then you have a disciple of John's by the name of Polycarp, and then a disciple of Polycarp is Irenaeus. So Irenaeus is very early, and he is getting it from a secondary source, which would be Polycarp. The primary source would be John. John was an eyewitness to the events. Polycarp was getting it from John, and then Irenaeus is getting it from Polycarp. So Irenaeus writes an entire treatise against heresies, and he would address all of these heresies that were creeping into the early churches. Augustine, same thing, and all of these people, I'm sure we've heard these people, Augustine, Tertullian, Origen, all of these early church fathers spent a lot of time quoting. This is why it's so great to have them, is because this is how we know what was Orthodox belief at the time and what was accepted as gospel at the time. Why? Because a lot of these writings, we find them quoting the Bible. Okay, let's do one more verse and then we'll be done. All right, verse 23. When he arrived and saw what the grace of God had done, he was glad and encouraged them all to remain true to the Lord with their hearts. So this tells you the fact that Barnabas was a leader in the early Christian church, number one. He is entrusted with the responsibility to ensure that these early churches are following the Orthodox beliefs of the church in Jerusalem. And the reason why they have to follow the Orthodox beliefs of the church in Jerusalem, because that's ground zero. This is where it all begins. It's the resurrection. Bam. The Christianity, the faith now starts spreading like wildfire. Because why? A man was in the grave and he gets up and he walks out. That's why. And then lastly, Keith, can I have control, please?
Should we go? No.
Okay. And then also his presence, being a pillar in the church. Barnabas is a pillar in the church, and the fact that the church of Jerusalem sent Barnabas to Antioch reassures the people in Antioch of how loving these group of people in Jerusalem are. It wasn't like they sent some schlub like we say, well, send Miller. You know, and I show up and I'm like, no, I sent you, really? How can you do that to us? They sent Barnabas, who was a leader in the early church, and people knew it and respected him. Okay, let's go ahead and see, that's verse 23. Close with that. All right, let's go ahead and close in prayer. Our dear Heavenly gracious Father, we thank you and again praise you this morning for what you have done in our lives, and we would ask that you be again with those that we have made mention of prayer requests. We love these people and we want your will to work in their lives, and we would pray that that will be work in their healing, and their comfort and their joy. Father, we would ask that you be with us now as we go in and we celebrate Emma's accomplishments and what she's done as a student, and we would wish her